I'm sure that shortly I will get some questions beamed through to my box of tricks from the gallery up there, looking hopefully. And for those of you that are still to submit a question through the app, then please do so. But while I'm up here with the panel, before I come down into the audience with the mic, I'm suppose very struck by some very personal and affecting accounts, but also, from our two experts that get to go into businesses every day. I'm keen to hear from you on this one as well. I've got a question for the whole panel, really. When, to each of you, when is the best time to start succession planning? Conscious of the question that we asked the audience earlier. Who'd like to start?
I think the best time is yesterday. Always. That's when people ring me and say, when can we talk to you yesterday?
Yeah.
The sooner you start, even if you decide then that we're not ready to do this now, at least you've started to make a plan, and the plan has to evolve as you go along. So I think, as soon as you can, always for me.
Andrew.
Yeah, succession isn't just about the assets, it's about how to run the business, and that takes time to build up the skills and experience required to do that. So I think you need 10 years really to actually develop those skills and learn properly. So the sooner the better has to be the answer.
I mean, just thinking about those individuals in that next generation that you're all thinking about bringing into the business, and what have they all been up to? You said they've gone off and got other skills and experience. I mean,
So,
where else have they been in the
Well,
industry?
through the range, I've got my son-in-law who's worked for Syngenta, for Claws, for G's, and has just started working for me, so he's the first into the business. I've got one daughter who's a lawyer and one who works in finance. I don't think either of them actually will come home to the business. My oldest nephew, Fred, he's working for Bakkavor, running a factory for them. Two nieces who, again, I don't think are going to come into the business. One's working actually on a farm in South America at the moment. She's fluent in Spanish. She may come home.
Yeah.
And the two youngest lads who were on that rugby photo at the end, they're both at Harper Adams, and actually one of them was on work experience at Dovecote Park at the moment. So they're sort of earlier in their development, but we've got a very clear plan of what we want to do.
Yeah, great. Right. I'm off into the audience at this point, but I've also got some questions. So as I head out into the audience, just if you can get your thinking caps on. The first question we've got, and this is a great one. Somebody submitted a question through the app. How can I hand over control while ensuring I can still play a role on the farm? Having a docile retirement scares me. Certainly my old man says if I hadn't got stock to go around in the morning, I'd have nothing to get up for. James, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so one of the things that cropped up when we looked at doing our own thing, as we were having a family conversation, was the fact that I didn't really like working with sheep, despite the fact that sheep's our primary enterprise. This through my uncle, who absolutely loves sheep. He lives for sheep. So one of the things we looked at was actually going into a share farming agreement on the sheep, and we ran that for about 5 years. Now that worked okay, but we're not doing it now, and the lesson learned is that actually he wasn't ready for that. He didn't want to hand over the responsibility. He still wanted to be absolutely involved with it. So the handing over of it has to be the mindset of the person involved. If you want to start taking things a bit easier, then you've got to allow the space to allow someone else to take on and to make mistakes. Do you know what? They're going to stuff up because you did, because that's just the space you need. But it's stepping back and saying, yeah, you go on and do that, but I'd like to still participate. I'd like to have a role within there. And it's that listening and understanding between whoever the parties are that's what you want to do. It's not always easy, though. It certainly wasn't easy for my uncle, that's for sure.
Sean, James mentioned share farming there. How does share farming change the tax implications for retirement? Are there any watch-outs there we need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think in terms of the land, it's normally not too much of a problem, because assuming that the farmer has owned the land for at least 2 years, it's still being occupied for agricultural purposes. So it should be okay for the relief on the land. The issue is more with the farmhouse. The revenue are getting much more interested in farmhouses. They're becoming much more contentious. it's just really the size of the prize for the revenue. So where they see a potential to charge inheritance tax because the rules haven't been fully complied with, they'll have a good go at it. So it's important, any sort of contract farming or share farming or whatever, that the person living in the farmhouse is also doing the farming to preserve the relief.
Okay, great. Now, this is really a question for the whole panel. We talked about when is the best time to start succession planning. We've got a question, though, asking how do I start succession planning and what comes first. Now, the three farmers on the panel have all got very different experiences, and they would all, I'm sure they might do things differently with a second opportunity. But Louise, just some thoughts from you, perhaps to start with, on how you think we can start succession planning, and what do you think comes first before I go to the rest of the panel?
I think what comes first is an overall goal for the family farm. What is the plan to build a big business and sell it? That's a succession plan all in itself. And I think lots of farmers don't perhaps consider that. It might be that we're going to build a big business, we'll sell it, and the family can benefit from that. So it does depend very much on what the overall family goal is. But if the family goal predominantly is to continue with the farming, then it's about looking at the core competency of that business. And I use business rather than farming as a phrase because I think sometimes it's important to look at it as a business. And businesses always do best if they stick to their core competency. That's not to discredit diversification. But it's looking at what is this farm is about, what can this land best produce, what can it best support, and then taking it on from there. But every succession plan is different and every farming family is different. And the important thing, as I think we've all said, is that you have to keep reviewing it. It's not something that you write down and then put in the drawer and say, well, we've done the succession plan, that's fine. I urge my families, once I've got them going, we certainly meet yearly if we can, or more often, or sometimes I'm just at the end of the phone. But it's an evolving process, same as in any business plan.
James, you talked about the importance of reviewing the plan. Is that something you actually do, or is it just something you stuck on the slide?
No, well, I mean, unfortunately, we're having to review it at the moment because of circumstances that took place. I mean, it's interesting in a way. It's interesting, as Andrew said, about the burden of responsibility that can be felt upon a family of the continuing on the business, continuing on the farm. It's the way grandfather did it, it's what he wanted, so I've got to do the same. And we shouldn't be looking at it like that. We should be looking at it in its own merits for a business and what it can do. My two children are 10 and 13, and I actually try to involve them a little bit in the business. I ask them their opinion. I tell them what's happening on the farm, what we're doing, why we're doing it. What do they think about it? All right, you get some sensible answers, you get some not sensible answers. But it's engaging their thought processes about the business, and sometimes we will even have conversations around what do they want to do in the future? What's your future careers? My son presented me with his life plan, what he wanted to do, go work for a contractor for a few years and then come back on the farm. I roundly shot that down. That's not going to happen. He's going to go somewhere else and work. Again, following it, I want you to have experience elsewhere. Don't come back and do what I've done. That's I might be doing the right thing, I might not, but go somewhere else and do it. Go out and get some experience in the world before coming back. But as an older generation, you need to be receptive to receive them in as well.
Any further thoughts from the panel? We haven't exactly got a forest of hands out here yet, but there are a couple of questions that are Abby, have you're going to just pick something up before we move on?
Yeah, I'll add something in. I actually hate the word succession. Don't bother to use it. It's too formal. I think anything that you can do today to make tomorrow a little bit better is a positive. And that doesn't mean that you've got to go out and write a will. It doesn't mean you've got to go out and hand that business over. It could just be simple as, today I'm just going to show you the accounts on the computer, or these are all the people that we buy X, Y, and Z off. Just some little bits and pieces just to start integrating that person in, and just start from there.
I'd just like to pick up on that. In some of the research that I've done, some of my findings were that the problem with succession planning is the language that we use, and I'm with Abby very much that I think succession planning is the wrong thing to call it. From a purely business perspective, we would call it business planning. But I think that particular vocabulary is very difficult for us as monarchists. Succession equals death. The monarch only succeeds on the death. So When you talk to people about succession, they think that's what's going to happen when I die, and none of us particularly want to think about that. And I think that succession or retirement also means being put out to grass, and farmers are tied to the land. So the thought that we've got to talk about when you're dead or when you're not farming anymore, it's really difficult. It's terribly emotive, and I'm completely with Abby that I don't like to call it succession planning. The problem is that's the phrase we're all using. As far as I'm concerned, you can call it George. It doesn't matter what you call your plan, as long as you've got one.
I think
Great.
that's true, Terry. I think what we see a lot of is people won't start the conversation because they think it's just about handing a farm over. It's not about that. It's about having the sort of the chat about the management and where that goes. And the sort of pace of handover will be different for every single family. And it's got to be right for them. But that's what puts people off starting the conversation in a lot of cases.
Okay, we've got 2 questions which could well tie into that thread that we've just pulled up there. So, Rob, do you want to say who you are and where you're from?
So quite a few of you know me. Rob Harrison, dairy farmer. I'm quite sad, and I'm not sad because of the speakers, because they've been excellent, and I'm not sad because I'm getting old. But I'm sad because I'm sat by David, and we were in Young Farmers in the early noughties talking about topics like this. I've been to quite a few NFU conferences, and I've been to similar kind of sessions, people are living longer. I think there is more information out there now. I think there's some really good examples out there now. But if I also see, over the last 20 years, I still see an awful lot of businesses that aren't facing up to their issues, an awful lot of businesses that aren't moving forward because they're not dealing with it and they're not having those difficult conversations. And how can we change the culture where people think about how are they going to plan retirement? How are they going to bring new blood into the industry? Because we lose a lot of good people because we don't face up to how we plan it. And also I can see farms that will be lost and broken up in my area because people don't want to have those conversations. How do we change the culture around the whole industry to move forward, to be more productive, to feed the world in the future?
Thanks, Rob. Anyone want to comment on culture change? Abby, this has got you written all over it, surely.
I suppose that the main thing I would say is don't repeat the loop. Everybody in here is in here because they're concerned about succession. Let's not repeat it. Let's not see any of the problems that we've seen. Let's do something different. We've all had lessons from it. That would be the main thing.
Great. And Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of come at this sort of from a policy aspect. I mean, we do have an opportunity with the agriculture bill. And is there potential within that bill to have some kind of provision for, say, skills and training improvement that does look at sort of business planning and succession planning to perhaps improve awareness going forward? And certainly that's something that we're going to be trying to be working with DEFRA on.
Now, James Gray, question from you, which may continue this thread, but over to you.
Thank you very much, Terry. I'm a AHA tenant, 4th generation, but 2nd generation as far as the tenancy is concerned. And when I took over from my father, farming had that was back around about 97, farming had just had the best 30 or 40 years probably it's ever going to have. And the period that I farmed has been okay. We've had basic payment coming in. But we don't know where we're going now. Total income from farming is dropping all the time. I'm not sure that I'm going to be handing my son a poison chalice or not. He's seen what I've made of it and what my father made of it. And I can't work out how to get him to separate the emotion of taking on the farm and the farmhouse and all that historic baggage from the fact that he might be inheriting something which is just going to flog him to death. That's one thing, and I'd like your comment on it. And the second is, just quickly, that generation, and increasingly more since he graduated, have been filled with ideas of work-life balance. And my understanding of farming in the past 10 years, there hasn't been one. I don't know how to get over that either. Could you comment?
Andrew, are you going to pick that up first?
I can only feel the full empathy because that's what I was alluding to. You know, do I want my children to come into this industry? Because it is bloody tough. You know, it's hard on the emotions, it's hard on the finances, and we work harder and harder. And the work, like, I've got a lot of young people working for me. I've got 400 people working for me. Business succession for me isn't just about my kids, it's about all of the young workers I want to bring through the business as well and get the best out of them. I think there's no doubt about it, where we've been heading at the moment, our industry is getting poorer and poorer. But we are seeing more specialisation, greater consolidation, which should help reverse that, although there'll be less of us involved. And to get that reversal done, we're going to need to be more professional, and we're going to have to live in a modern world where we do have a work-life balance, and hopefully use technology and better management to make that happen. So I think we could be heading down a horrible place, but I think there are things we can do, although there might be some unpleasant consequences of having less farmers in the room, for instance, that will actually balance that out in the long run. And the market will sort it out. It just there might be a bit of pain to go through to get there.
Ros David, I'm a county advisor for Hertfordshire. What if you can't succeed? What if your parents are the last one in the line? How do you go about managing that business to ultimately see that none of it will ever be yours?
So, the last in the line, but you're not going to inherit the farm. You've got to paddle your own canoe.
But what if you were born into it and that's all you knew? So I'm just interested. Is it sort of being able to manage decline? How do you still go and support? You know, your parents are aging. You're paddling your own canoe. That's exactly what I'm facing at the moment. How do I see them out, probably for the good few 10, 20 years, and make sure that they're still enjoying a work-life balance and being able to do that as well? Because if anybody's got any tips, I'd really love to hear them, because it is very difficult to manage that at this moment in time.
Anyone want to? That's quite a tricky question. Oh yes, Louise. Hello. I was going to come over to you, ask you a question about tenancies in a moment, but maybe you can pick this one up first, and then I'll ask you about succession.
Okay, sorry everybody. So it's Louise Staples from the NFU, if you haven't sort of gathered. I really wanted to say there that I think if you're really keen and you really want to take on that farm, I'm sure that estate or that landowner who owns that farm knows that. You absolutely must go and speak to him. It's exactly what we've been saying. It's all about communication. And just...
What if they are so short-term that is, the pound signs are just about the farmhouse. That's, you are up against this. They are commercial themselves. They've been losing money on that house for so long, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just putting it out there with regards to what some people are facing at this moment in time and the struggles we are trying to engage. We could probably think further ahead than they could ever, but at the same time, the drawbridge is up, and that's what we're trying to do. We're happy to go along as we are at this moment in time, but for those people that are desperate or don't have anything else to go back to, how can we open up those other opportunities, which Brexit may well do?
Okay, so Brexit might change it. I'm just going to say, look, yes, there are some owners out there, some estates that do want to sell. That is just how it is. But I want to say to some that think they're at the end of their road because they're on an AHA and they can't succeed, I just want to say it's not the end of the road. That's where you go and communicate, and you could probably end up on a farm business tenancy, be given a long term, and actually be able to regress things. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Louise, while I've got, don't rush off. James Small told the story around 86 Act tenancies and uncertainty around succession of those tenancies. You picked up on that, and I think actually when we were preparing for today, Andrew's got a similar situation with an 86 Act tenancy as well. So anything from, with your NFU advisor hat on that you wanted to say about 86 Act tenancies and succession?
Okay, thanks, Terry. Yeah, look, we do tenant meetings in every region every year, so going round do pick up on things. I really want to say on that, it again is what's already been said this afternoon, it is plan, plan, plan. So make sure you have thought about who you want to succeed to that AHA tenancy, and then can they succeed, and what do I need to change within the business to make sure that they probably can succeed. And also it's just, yeah, some of you definitely out there, I go to some meetings, I'm still surprised that some people will say to me, oh, but my son will automatically succeed. And I have to tell them, no, it's not automatic. There are rules that have to be applied and that you do have to apply to succeed. And that's what has to be planned.
Louise,
Great.
I'd just like to pick up on that, and that I'm finding with families that there's a lot of misunderstanding about succession of 86 Act tenancies, about who is eligible, who isn't eligible, and actually that even if you haven't got an eligible successor, it's still worth talking to the landlord, because he might be quite happy for your nephew who's been working on the farm. So everything's about communication as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks all. So a lot of today's been around succession on family farms, but Tom Rawson's at the back, itching to get hold of the microphone. Tom, you've got a very different sort of farming business model, and I can see you're itching to get hold of the mic. So what did you want to tell us?
Well, I found the whole session fairly depressing, to be quite honest, but also fairly exciting. Because actually people, I came to this session because it said the session will look at future-proofing the farm business and chart the flow from engaging new entrants, changing farm structure succession, and key consideration affecting the industry. And all we've heard about is actually succession planning of people getting out of the business as opposed to people trying to get into the business. In our business in the last 3 years, we've gone from employing 3 to over 30 people. Working with farmers that are wanting other people to farm their land for them. I think it's quite exciting. I've been shot down many times for saying this, but the problem that most people got in this room handing money over is that they've actually got lots of money. So actually, when people are getting quite depressed about agriculture and the livelihood it gives, there's a lot of people who have bloody good lives. The girl in my business, she came to us having got sacked from a bar job. We gave her a job for a month just to give her an opportunity. Within a year, she's off minimum wage and she's on 24 grand a year plus house and bills in the dairy industry. She's now in the top 50% of earners in the UK. Most people, when you add in all the benefits of agriculture, it's absolutely amazing. Plus the amount of wealth people are sat on as well. I'm really excited about our industry, and I'm sort of excited about this session because I'm quietly thinking to myself, and Pete's next to me as well, that bloody hell, there's going to be so much opportunity here. It's unreal. But how are we going to get across to people that actually there is companies out there, people that will come and farm your farm for you. You can get all the tax benefits. You can stay in the house. That should be a lot smarter for this.
Have you got a question?
Yes, exactly what I've just said.
Look, inevitably, because of the structure of the industry, the conversation is necessarily going to gravitate towards family businesses, but I could see you with your hand up, and of course there are different business structures out there, and there are plenty of opportunities that we need to focus on as well. So thank you very much for that contribution. I saw Fred Ryle with his hand up earlier. Fred, what did he want to ask?
Yeah, I farm in Northeast. A lot of your problems are actually opportunities, like the last person said, but one thing you've never touched on is there's a big difference between people wanting to be in the business and what you build up over 40 years, which in my case happens to be that length of time. The asset value creeps up to the point where I've got mine managed, I hope. But I want to ask you this. You haven't touched on the subject of conflict, and that is non-farming parts of the family do want their fair share sometimes, and it isn't very easy. Now, I'm going to be blunt. How do you deal with that conflict? Because I've been asked on many times, and it's happened within my family.
Come on, Louise.
Well, I spoke earlier about the dichotomy that farmers have, and I believe that non-farming siblings live in their own dichotomy as well, because they don't want to be involved in the farm, but they also don't want it to be sold, and oft that they also want or expect something out of it. And I suppose I go back to my start, and it's all about communication. What is that expectation of the family? and you know, having that conversation early, whether they be boys or girls, right, you know, it doesn't matter to me. Non-farming siblings, you know, you have to have that conversation.
Could I qualify that in the sense that it's usually after someone's died that, dare I say it, they come out of the woodworm because they see how much money there is. And that's the problem. And, you know, let's not hide behind it. It's under the radar.
No, and I try to get families not to hide behind it. I'm working with a family up north, and you know, they've got non-farming siblings, farming siblings, and mother, matriarch, is 86, and you know, we're sitting around the table and I'm being very careful and saying, well, you know, I don't really like to talk about it, but you know, at some point, you know, you're going to leave us. She said, don't beat about the bush. There's two things these youngsters won't talk about. One is death, and the other is sex, and everybody does both. and she's right, you know, and the sooner we can have that. But you know, it goes back to familial history and what's happened in the past, and there's an awful lot of unexplained emotions within a family, and that's why farming is so different. If you've got an engineering business, it's really easy because you go to the factory, you make widgets, you take the profit out of a limited company, you reinvest in somewhere else, and that's for the non-engineering siblings. The engineering siblings go and make widgets. It's dead easy. You've got inheritance succession sorted all in one. But in farming, you can't do that because, and that's kind of a mindset you need to think about. Inheritance is assets, succession is management, and the two don't have to be the same person. You know, so for me, I think it's easier because I'm from a farming family. I've got a pure business background, so I try and look at it from a business perspective rather than, and try and pull the emotion out. And it's really difficult for a family, and that's why I work with families, because I can help them distance themselves a little bit. It's not easy.
There was a suggestion at the back about farming families not moving forwards and giving opportunities for contract farmers, I think. To what extent do the panel think that the current basic payment system actually acts as a barrier to succession?
Andrew, any thoughts?
It's a very good question. I mean, I think there's no question, I'll turn it around the other way, that with the decline in direct payments, I think there's no question that that's going to lead to some restructuring in the industry. And clearly there are going to be succession issues as a result of that. So I guess that but as to your question, yes, does it inflate land values? Does it make people want to keep hold of the farm because of the income that it provides? Then yes, possibly. But I guess that we are going to be going through a period of quite fundamental change in the way that farm businesses receive their funding in terms of their risk profile, etc. So I guess there is going to be change, and we shall see.
Okay, we've got a few people we need to get through. Chris Cardell is chairman of the NFU's National Tenants Forum. Chris.
Thank you, panel. We've talked a lot about the asset structure within succession, and sometimes that can get bogged down in the discussions. But, you know, we've mentioned there share farming as well, but ourselves, you know, we're tenant farmers, and over 30% of the land is tenanted. If we then add in share and contract, we're talking about 50% of the land of our food production, is multiple use, and it's floating assets for one, and nothing really much to hand down. So within our own structure, we wanted to give the daughter and son-in-law a chance to move forward. So we gave them a base to set their own business up from, and they've now been very successful and moved off with that. Do we think enough about that, or do we sometimes get bogged down in the asset and how we're going to bring somebody into the business rather than thinking, well, actually, we could just split off some of this and allow them to go off and set themselves up themselves and make their own way in life?
Well, it's not. I'll try and jump in. Look, I think one of the things we're getting a little bit bogged down with here is around the succession of asset and value of it, and then there's also business development, and there's the business element as well within things. With that particular one, you know, I think we should be looking at what we've got and what we can make best use of what we've got, and when we're bringing someone or we're considering bringing someone in, a new family member, or it hasn't got to be a family member. I mean, business succession isn't necessarily about a family member coming in. It's about bringing someone in, new skills, new abilities, new innovations into the business for the benefits of that. But you might want to hold some sort of assets that you want to transfer within the family, and how do you work that? That's part of what this business planning is about. It's how do we best work and make best use of what we've got. The listening exercise comes with the person who is the current incumbent allowing the flexibility and freedom for those new developments to take place, for the growth of the new person to come in, for the growth of the new business on an asset that is there. Whether you own the asset or not, if you have access to it and you have the ability to use it, but you might want to use it in a slightly different direction, then we should be able to do so to allow someone, as part of an agreed route, to be able to develop what they want to do. Why do we always have to do what we've always done?
Just very quick question from Robin Milton over here, and then we're going to need to start to wrap up so that you can all go and have your tea. Robin.
Bit more of a positive note, really. I've done the handover thing. Split from my brother, dealt with that. No arguments. We didn't ask the professionals. We sat down and sorted it out ourselves. Then told them what we wanted. My son's my senior partner now, as my brother's two sons are his majority partners. Our two businesses now turn over more than double what they turned over as one before we split. Just like to ask the panel then, how do we get to this stage where we precipitate the conversation, like I've done with my business, before there's a problem? Everyone today has said it's precipitated by a problem. Let's get it apart from you, Andrew. But how do we get past that stage and recognise that actually, in the next generation, there is a good future? How do we give them the chance and recognise that they can actually probably do better than we can?
I'll have a little go at that. Because that is right in my sweet spot, actually. I think, I'm 54 years old now, and I was put in charge of our carrot business when I was 23 years old. And I had a lot of energy, a lot of ambition, and I also had a lot of naivety, which actually, when I look back, was actually a strength, because I wasn't scared of anything. And I think, having young blood in the business and giving them their head and letting them have some space to operate, I think can really create some value. I'm now the preacher. I'm trying to practice what I preach. It's not easy, but I think, giving them something safe, like a spin-off business, letting them have their head and letting them have a go, see what they can do, giving them a little bit of support and a hand on the tiller when they want it, I think is a really, really good thing to do.
Okay. This conversation could carry on, and apologies to those we haven't got to. I was taking notes when our panellists talked, and there are definitely some themes that came through. I think the phrases that really hit home were, you can't plan too much. We'd heard about the importance of listening. I think it was Andrew that said if they do want to join the business, make sure or allow them to go and get the skills and experience that you need in your business first if they're family members. But clearly, talking to Tom at the back there as well, we need to recognise the importance of other business models that might be out there as well. We heard Abby's story, and she talked about the importance of seeking guidance and getting help, being aware of your situation, and I think the really important line from Abby's note, from Abby's presentation was, if in doubt, try and manage your own succession, which I think really hit home very hard. When Sean was talking, he talked about the importance of planning early. He talked about the importance of maximising tax breaks involving the family, but also taking advice. We also heard from James about the importance of being clear on what you want. Don't be afraid to spend money and do it early, because you'll save money in the long term. If you need third-party help, get it. And as we touched on, review the plan regularly and the circumstances, people and opinions within the business. My huge thanks to all of our panel. And can I ask you all to show your appreciation in the usual manner?